Tonight, you will hear from Barack Obama like you have never heard from him before. A video has been uncovered from a campaign event in 2007 of then-candidate Obama speaking before an audience of African-American ministers, including the Reverend Jeremiah Wright. Now, portions of the nearly 40-minute speech can be found online in an edited video shot by the Daily Press newspaper that is based in Hampton, Virginia. However, that version runs only about 9 minutes and omits the most inflammatory comments. It also does not include any references to Reverend Wright. In addition, this event was covered by other media outlets, including the Associated Press and local television stations. But again, the most outrageous comments were completely ignored. This is further proof that the mainstream media has been in the pocket of Barack Obama since the day that he arrived on the national stage. Now, let's take a look at what the left-wing press has been hiding since 2007. Now, we begin with a clip of Senator Obama repeatedly praising the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who again was in the crowd at Hampton University. Now, keep in mind, by the time this speech was delivered in June of 2007, Reverend Wright was a known quantity in the world of politics. He had already been disinvited to Barack Obama's campaign announcement in Springfield, Illinois, and he had already appeared on Hannity and Combs months earlier as he attempted to defend his controversial views. By the way, his last appearance on TV during that campaign. And yet here's what then Senator Obama said about him then.
And then I've got to give a special shout out to my pastor, the guy who puts up with me, counsels me, listens to my wife complain about me. He's a friend and a great leader, not just in Chicago, but all across the country. So please, everybody, give an extraordinary welcome to my pastor, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, Jr., friend of the United Church of Christ. Where's he at? There he is. That's him. That's him right there. You're wearing a suit today, right?
Now it gets even worse as candidate Obama then injects a heavy dose of racially charged rhetoric into his remarks. Speaking about Hurricane Katrina, he goes off script and he claims that the victims of that storm were ignored by the government. On the other hand, 9/11 survivors and those impacted by Hurricane Andrew, they received endless government assistance. Watch this.
I just want to give you one example because this really steams me up. This isn't in the prepared remarks. Down in New Orleans, where they still have not rebuilt 20 months later, there's a law, federal law, when you get reconstruction money from the federal government called the Stafford Act. And basically it says when you get federal money, you've got to give a 10% match. The local government's got to come up with 10%. Every $10 federal government comes up with, local government's got to give $1. Now, here's the thing. When 9/11 happened in New York City, they waived the Stafford Act, said this is too serious a problem. We can't expect New York City to rebuild on its own. Forget that dollar you got to put in. Well, here's $10. And that was the right thing to do. When Hurricane Andrew struck in Florida, people said, look at this devastation. We don't expect you to come up with your own money. Here's the money to rebuild. We're not going to wait for you to scratch it together because you're part of the American family. What's happening down in New Orleans? Where's your dollar? Where's your Stafford Act money? Makes no sense. Tells me the bullet hasn't been taken out. Tells me that somehow the people down in New Orleans, they don't care about as much.
Now, this notion that the government is turning its back on African-American communities while doing all it can for predominantly white areas is repeated throughout the speech. Look at this.
And that's why we need additional federal public transportation dollars flowing to the highest need communities. We don't need to build more highways out in the suburbs if we have people in the cities right now who want to work but have no way to get into those jobs. We've got to help connect them to the jobs that exist. We should be investing in minority-owned businesses in our neighborhoods so people don't have to travel for miles away.
Joining me now to talk about this video is the man who broke the story, Tucker Carlson from the Daily Caller. Tucker, welcome on board. It's pretty explosive stuff, and we've got more that we're going to get to here. Let's backtrack here. This video was released, or at least, what, 9 minutes of it was, and a prepared text was released, but not the ad-libbed remarks by the president, which are the most controversial. It never got reported on, correct?
That's exactly right. This was covered at the time. There were reporters in the room. I had a show at the time on another channel, and I covered the remarks that were released. But it turned out that most of the print reporters, maybe all of them writing on this story, were writing from the prepared remarks given to them by the Obama campaign. And so you saw people like Andrew Sullivan, the blogger, claim in his story that he was releasing a transcript of Obama's speech, but it wasn't a transcript. These were, again, prepared remarks approved and released by the Obama campaign. And again in this speech, you can sit and read the remarks against the actual speech, and you'll see that Obama goes off script repeatedly and ad-libs and says things that we can't find him saying to any other audience during the course of this campaign.
Do you notice a change in the way he delivers the speech before a predominantly African-American
audience? Well, the accent, let me just be totally clear, and anyone who just watched it and who's seen Obama speak in public over the last 10 years will note this accent is absurd. This is not the way Obama talks. At least it's not the way he's talked in the dozens, the scores of speeches I've watched him give or public appearances I've seen him make. This is a put-on. This is phony. That's the issue one. Second issue is he is telling a predominantly black audience something very clear. The federal government doesn't like you because you are black. That's a demagogic thing to say. That's a divisive thing.
That's what he's saying.
They don't like you because they are black. That is the theme of the speech from front to back, from beginning to end. They don't like you because of your skin color. And that is a shockingly, that's a nasty thing to say. It's a divisive thing to say. It's a demagogic thing to say. And in the case of Katrina, it's an untrue thing to say. At the moment he uttered those words, you're getting shortchanged in Katrina reconstruction funds, the administration, the government had pledged $110 billion to the Gulf. 2 weeks before this speech, the Bush administration gave the Gulf, the Katrina-affected areas, $7 billion with no strings attached. He was a sitting senator. He knew that, and he said this anyway to that audience. And I think that's a shocking thing.
So he's saying there that they don't care as much about you, Katrina, but they cared about people after 9/11. They took care of people after Hurricane Andrew. Then he says,
predominantly
we don't need to build more highways out in the suburbs. We should be investing in minority-owned businesses in our neighborhoods. I thought this wasn't red America, blue America, but the United States of America. So is he using the word suburbs to suggest white communities?
Okay, this is not a dog whistle. This is a dog siren. These are appeals to racial solidarity. And a few minutes before that, he said, our people, our young people, should have gotten the construction jobs to rebuild after Katrina, but instead they went to Halliburton. Right? So look, he's making a very clear case, again, on the basis of his racial solidarity with this audience, that they are getting shafted by a racist federal government. All right. And by the way, unless you can provide evidence that that's true, unless you can nail down factually that that's true, you should not say things like that, because it's dangerous to say things like that.
Well, it's incendiary, and then it raises in my mind, all right, who is the real Barack Obama? He said that I had no idea, none whatsoever, that Jeremiah Wright, I sat in the pews for 20 years, he is like family to me, and even his praise in this speech. Now, the timing of this is interesting, because I had interviewed on Hannity and Combs, I interviewed Reverend Wright. We got into a big battle about black liberation theology. That was in March of 2007. Wright had been disinvited to give the invocation at his announcement he's running for president just a couple of months earlier.
Right.
So Wright is there. This is June now of 2007. So Wright is already a controversial figure here. Now it's interesting as this whole thing goes on. Then he has to give this big speech in Philly on race. So I decided we'd put the two speeches together, and we'll take a look at one, we'll take a look at the other. In other words, this is what the media didn't report on. This is what the media didn't say. Very controversial things by Barack Obama that was never reported on versus the big speech, which I believe was done out of political expediency. We'll let our audience decide. Let's show them side by side.
I've got to give a special shout out to my pastor, the guy who puts up with me, counsels me, listens to my wife complain about me. He's a friend and a great leader. Everybody give an extraordinary welcome to my pastor, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, Jr.
I have already condemned in unequivocal terms the statements of Reverend Wright that have caused such controversy and in some cases pain. For some, nagging questions remain. Did I know him to be an occasionally fierce critic of American domestic and foreign policy? Of course.
When Hurricane Andrew struck in Florida, people said, look at this devastation. We don't expect you to come up with your own money here. What's happening down in New Orleans? Where's your dollar? Where's your Stafford Act money? Makes no sense. Tells me the bullet hasn't been taken out. Tells me that somehow the people down in New Orleans, they don't care about as much.
Reverend Wright's comments were not only wrong, but divisive. Divisive at a time when we need unity. Racially charged at a time when we need to come together to solve a set of monumental problems. Problems that are neither black or white or Latino or Asian, but rather problems that confront us all.
Who's the real Barack Obama, Tucker? Two very different people.
They're speaking different language, different cadences, different accents, different gestures. I mean, the falseness here is overwhelming. And I would say that whether he was putting on a Southern accent or an Asian accent, it doesn't matter. He is playing a role in one of these cases. It's not clear which one. I assume in the Hampton speech he's putting on a persona he doesn't normally occupy to pander to the crowd, but who knows? Either way, you are seeing a remarkable exhibit of falseness on display. There's no other explanation for this. And by the way, I would say this about any politician.
They don't care as much about you. Also, we don't need to build highways out in the suburbs,
but not to our neighborhoods.
So what do you conclude?
Look, I conclude that this, well, I'm not exactly sure is the truth. I'm not God. I can't read Obama's mind or look into his soul. But it seems to me this is a case of extreme pandering. He is talking to an audience in a way he thinks resonates with them, but he's also using fear to motivate them. Again, the core of this speech, a very simple message. The federal government doesn't like you because you're black. Imagine telling people that. Imagine trying to make them more fearful, more paranoid, more hurt. That's a truly divisive and sick thing to do, and it's on display in this video. This is not one right-winger's opinion. We're posting the entire video on the Daily Caller, and you can watch it.
Is this the whole 40-minute video? You're posting the whole 40 minutes?
Every second. Of course, because we will be relentlessly attacked on two grounds. One, people say, this has already been reported. Well, actually, it hasn't been reported, and I know because I reported on it the first time. And second, we will be accused of clipping this to our ends. And so we're just going to put the whole thing out there and people can judge. But the first thing that will jump off the screen at you is this is not the Barack Obama you've watched for the past 8 years if you've been paying attention. And this guy is whipping up race hatred and fear, period.
How would you classify the comments? Racial? Is that best way? Is it
Of course I would. Of course I absolutely would. If a white politician got up in front of a white audience and said, here's what you should know about black people, they don't like you. They're in charge, and they're shafting you, and they're profiting from your suffering. What would you say that is? That is racial rhetoric designed to make people fearful.
Yeah, all right, let's go to what he says about black churches in this speech. And again, the whole video is up on the Daily Caller if you want to take a look at the 40-minute speech. Remember, the media only at the time put up, what, 9 or 10 minutes that they reported on?
It was a little less than 10.
Little less than 10 minutes. All right, here's more of that speech that was never seen before.
And when it comes to faith, we've been told that all that matters is what divides us. Evangelicals, don't be talking to mainland Protestants. Black church, that's different from the white church. Had stories about Trinity United Church of Christ because we talked about black people in church. Oh, that might be a separatist church. Catholics can't be getting together with Protestants or Muslims or Jews.
Now let me play that through this prism, and that's when I interviewed. And remember, Reverend Wright, he was in the audience. This is June. He was disinvited from the invocation when Obama announced he's running for president. Came on my show 2 months later. This was the last interview that Reverend Wright did. Hear what he said about black liberation theology and, you know, what he goes on to say in that particular clip there, because we talk about black people in church. Here was my exchange with Reverend Wright. This is on the website today. Well, let me just inform our audience, and I want you to respond if you can. It says commitment to God. By the way, I'm with you, and I hope you'll pray for me, Reverend. Commitment to the black community, commitment to the black family, adherence to the black work ethic. Now, Reverend, if every time we said black, if it was a church and those words were white, wouldn't we call that church racist?
No, we would call it Christianity. We've been saying that since there was a white Christianity. We've been saying that ever since white Christians took part in the slave trade. We've been saying that ever since they had churches in slave castles. We don't have to say the word white. We just have to live in white America, United States of white America.
I'm going to ask you this question.
How many books of Dwight Hopkins have you read?
You're very angry and defensive. I'm just trying to ask a question here. Barack Obama goes to Obama goes to your church.
You haven't answered my question.
And it seems to be when you say the black community, black family, black work ethic, black community.
It seems to an arrogant, ignorant person. I'm asking you. Have you answered me? How many books of Dwight Hopkins have you read? I'm going to say this, whether you like it or not, I'm going to get my words in. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to tell you, I think as a Christian, sir, I think as a Christian, you should not separate by race in this day and age. And that's why a lot of people are going to look at that and say, we're all supposed to be united under Christ, aren't we? Now, it goes into black liberation theology, which we examine. And there might have been one other interview that he did after that, but I don't remember which one. But black liberation theology, you know, the black community, the black this, the black that. And I'm asking him about, and then he's praising him here, but then he gives this other speech. Did he just say those words in Philadelphia to make the controversy go away? What does he believe?
Well, let me just say, I believe that Jeremiah Wright married Michelle and Barack Obama 20 years ago tomorrow. I believe that was their anniversaries tomorrow. Amazing. Look, my personal feeling is that he speaks to each audience what he thinks that audience wants to hear. But let me say how totally disingenuous it is for Obama to claim that Jeremiah Wright was attacked for talking about black people in church. That's utterly false. I reported on this, too, at the time. People had very specific concerns about the nature of black liberation theology. It wasn't talking about black people in church. To say something like that before this audience is, again, to reinforce the point that the rest of the world doesn't like you because of your skin color. This makes people more fearful, more afraid, more paranoid, and by the way, more cut off from the rest of America. This is the opposite of what a uniter does. This is what a demagogue does, and it's wrong.
All right, let's go to some of the other tapes that we haven't had time to run yet. Now, this is, again, this was part of a speech, most of which was publicized, but not all of it. And it wasn't revealed until tonight with the Daily Caller. Now, let's run a piece of that. Obama talking about his meeting with Reverend Wright. Notice the different speaking style.
And that's where I met Reverend Wright and started going to Trinity United Church of Christ. And he helped me on another journey and introduced me to someone named Jesus Christ. And I learned that my sins could be redeemed. I learned that those things that I was too weak to accomplish myself, maybe he could accomplish them for me if I placed my trust in him. And I learned that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Many of the folks in this room know just where they were when the riot struck in Los Angeles. When tragedy struck the corner of Florence and Normandy, most of the ministers here know that those riots didn't erupt overnight. There had been a quiet riot building up in Los Angeles and across this country for years. These quiet riots that take place every day are born from the same place as the fires and destruction and the police decked out in riot gear and death. They happen when a sense of disconnect settles in and hope dissipates. Despair takes hold, and young people all across the country look at the way the world is and they believe that things are never going to get better. You tell yourself, my school will always be second rate. You tell yourself, there will never be a good job waiting for me to excel at. You tell yourself, I will never be able to afford a place that I can be proud of and call my home. That despair quietly simmers and makes it impossible to build strong communities and neighborhoods. And then one afternoon, a jury says, not guilty. Or a hurricane hits New Orleans, and that despair is revealed for the world to see.
You never hear the president speak like this in public.
Of course not.
So he is literally pandering to an audience, demagoguing, pushing racial division in the country by saying the people in New Orleans, they don't care about you as much, to a predominantly African-American audience, saying, hey, we don't need to build highways out in the suburbs. We need to build them in our neighborhoods. First of all, what do you make of the changing cadence?
Well, we've seen that game play before. Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, Joe Biden, and whatever. That's political pandering. This isn't pandering, though, Sean. This is Obama being who he is. He didn't evolve from the Frank Marshall Davis, Derek Bell teachings. He didn't evolve from his involvement with Bill Ayers and the others and Jeremiah Wright. Let's call it what it is. It's time we realize that he doesn't pander. While he uses whatever he needs to at the moment to say anything to an audience, this is his true self. Look at his record. Look at his 1998 remarks at Loyola, redistribution. Look at his remarks on the Warren courts not going far enough. He believes this stuff. He didn't evolve. He has not grown into the governance of this country.